Well, when you guys burst onto the scene in the early 90s, I remember I was a high school student. I first really noticed Arrested Development, the soundtrack of the movie Malcolm X. I was just finishing high school. You had, of course, exploded, and boy, did you explode on the international scene. Take us through that moment of achieving that initial success and global recognition.
It was an amazing feeling for us because we originated in Atlanta, which is where I'm at now. And in hip hop, there wasn't a lot of groups coming out of anywhere but New York and LA at the time. So it was a miracle just for us to be able to come out with music on a national and international level, period, because it was early hip hop. And then to be able to reach people across the planet, we were one of the only groups amongst our peers that were traveling overseas and doing international touring. So like we were hitting South Africa. We went to South Africa in 90, I want to say 94, and it might have been 95. And then we were doing, Europe and Australia and all of these incredible places where a lot of our peers in hip hop were still just doing the United States. And so for us, it was amazing to be able to reach the world in that way. And I think we really, you know, paved the way for a lot of hip hop groups to be able to follow after us too.
But from the beginning, my sense was you had this Afrocentric perspective. I mean, you talk about coming to South
Facts.
Africa in those years, even donating to the ANC's campaign at the end of Apartheid, very soon after you'd exploded onto the international scene, really. There you were as a group with Nelson Mandela on stage. What was that moment like?
Well, first of all, we were the first African Americans to donate to the ANC. And second of all, it was a life changing moment to be with Nelson Mandela. It was the first time I ever saw a leader get so much adulation and support. Like we were at the stadium about to speak with Nelson Mandela, and we saw people from South Africa literally running and jumping over chairs and jumping over tables to get a chance to just view him, just to get a chance to see him and be in his presence. It was 20,000 people at the event that we were at. I believe it was. I don't know the exact number, but it was huge. And just to see the excitement and to feel it in my own heart too, because he's a freedom fighter and Arrested Development's always been about freedom fighting. So to me, it was just one of the highlights of my life.
And of course, if I think of the social issues that were foremost on your minds at the time, from Mr. Windle bringing, I suppose, attention to the plight of homelessness, right? That was one of your breakthrough hits. What does it say to you that here we are all these years later and that song is as relevant now as it ever was?
It's sad, because, you hope that your music can help to bring about change and motivate people to bring about the change that you want. And I know it did, and I know it does. But you also realize as you get older that a lot of these problems will be there for the next generation. And all you can do is play your part. All you can do is do what you can do. And even though it may not change the entire world, it can change some people's hearts to make change in their areas and in their lives. And that's the most that any of us can do. So I feel a mixture. The other side of it is that the music is still relevant in a good way. It's still dope music. It's still great music. And that's inspiring on the other side of the coin. So it's two sides to it.
And I think, of course, of where America was at the time. I mean, on the back of what we had seen in LA around the murder or the killing of Rodney King, the riots there, it was an election cycle. But there was also the sense that change could come. Would you say that in many ways, if you think at the social scene and the political scene in America, there's been a kind of regression?
Well, yes. I mean, Rodney King was beat right in front of our eyes. None of the police officers that beat him were prosecuted and arrested for a crime that everybody saw. And so I remember there was riots during that year. We were in Los Angeles when the riots happened. So we were right in the heart of all of this stuff. As far as the regression of America's social realities, yes, I mean, there's some regression, there is some backwards movement. One of the things that we always talk about is it's up to us, self-determination as a people, to bring about the change that we want to see. And so our music is always about get up. You know, one of our songs, you mentioned it from the Malcolm X movie, Revolution, our song Revolution, talks about are you doing as much as you can for the struggle? Am I doing as much as I can for the struggle? So it's talking about all of us getting involved in helping us to bring about the freedom that we so well deserve and our children deserve.
Let's go back to that song, Revolution. It's the soundtrack of Malcolm X. You're working with Spike Lee. It is a moment, certainly in South Africa, we are about to taste the results of a resolution, of revolution. We're about to taste freedom. It's literally, the smell is in the air. It's on our lips. It's all we can think of. Having songs like that resonate with people whose struggles perhaps were not necessarily foremost in your minds as you wrote these songs, as you recorded these songs, but nonetheless having that music resonate across the world, reverberate really. What did that feel like?
It felt like a kindred spirit. It felt like we're connected. You know, I love that. Like for us, we were going through a lot of similar situations in America. A lot of people in Brazil going through a lot of similar situations. People in the Caribbean, people of course on the continent. So to me, it was a call out for change, for revolution, which is fundamental change. And yes, I mean, I'm grateful that the music was able to be a soundtrack. That's what we hope to do in general as a group is be a soundtrack for freedom, you know?
You talk about your music being music of hope in the face of the typical images and imagery that we see from hip hop in terms of the tropes that hip hop uses, the stereotypes that hip hop uses. Where do you see yourself fitting in that general picture today?
Farida, you want to take that?
Yeah, the thing that was always beautiful about hip hop with it, with us celebrating the 50-year anniversary is that it was always diversified. It always spoke to the experience, the real experience of our people in whatever circumstance. The only problem that I feel like we stand out, at least now, is that at this moment in time, it seems like there's only one experience being amplified. Um, and that is unfortunate only because it's so many different realities to speak on that develop that need our voices. But if you only focus on one, negative type of uh narrative, then it seems like we don't fit that narrative, but we never did. And our focus has always been about positive change, upliftment of our people, education, fun, love. All of those things are true experiences. But sometimes depending on what the agenda is, a different focus is amplified. But we always fit in. We will always represent a reality that is definitely existing and definitely needs to be spoken to and celebrated. And sometimes it's not always about fitting in. Sometimes what you need is to stand out and to um, really bring something different for people to focus on.
Yep.
You
I agree.
started with enormous commercial success in terms of 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days in the life of the major hits, the Grammy Awards, the acclaim. Obviously, as I said earlier, working with the likes of Spike Lee being featured in that soundtrack. How much did that pressure you to craft a particular type of sound going forward in order to keep up with that commercial success?
For me personally, as a producer, because I produced a lot of the first album and second album too. So for me, I wasn't worried about trying to craft a sound that would be as mainstream. Because to be honest, I was surprised the first album went as mainstream as it did. When you look at the music and the content that we were talking about, it really wasn't mainstream in general. I think it just happened to go mainstream because it was so unique and so fresh. So for me as a producer, I just wanted to make sure that the roots of what we're about was covered. And our second album, to me, was more politically conscious than the first one. And musically, I think it was reaching for more boundaries to be broken, than the first one was. So I'm sort of proud that we didn't fold to that type of pressure, because there is pressure. When you sell 4 million albums across the world, there's a pressure to try to either top that or at least equal that. So we didn't fall to that, and I'm grateful. And then even with our new albums, like we just dropped an album for the F and Love 2 years ago. We dropped a one right before that called Don't Fight Your Demons. We're performing a lot of that stuff as well on this coming tour. We're proud of this music. We feel like we've kept our pride and our soul, and at the same time bringing some new vibes that have a similar energy to it and spirit.
I imagine a huge part of the interest from South African audiences will be the affinity with struggles of particularly Black and brown people, both in the diaspora, but here on the continent in Africa. There'll be that commonality, that sense of family, brotherhood, sisterhood, if you like. What's your promise to those who are excited to come and see you at the Delicious Festival?
We write this music for you. We are you. So for us, it's a party. It's a celebration of our ancestors, our life, our death. And so we're excited. We're absolutely excited. This is one of our highlight shows of our, year. So we really want everybody to come, fill up the audience. Let's all have a great time, because our show is very much dependent on you guys. Like if you guys are there and waiting for us, we will give you the best show that we can ever give you. Put it that way.
I'm going to put my head.
One of the things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to put my head on the block and say you can look forward to one of the most dynamic audiences Johannesburg has to offer. This is the 10th anniversary of the Delicious Festival, and it's a highlight on the social calendar in Johannesburg, and it is always a party.
Yes.
Well, we love a good party. We are a party on stage.
Facts. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Facts.
We look forward to seeing you.
It's a celebration we're going to do. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Great stuff. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Current events, developing stories,
tough questions.
Your voice making a difference.
This is Breakfast with Bongani Bingwa.